Yes.
Yeah. Can we go 1, 2, 3 letter grade? I hate letter grades for drafts. Just rip the Band-Aid off real quick, just to get a feel for how everyone thinks the Vikings did this weekend.
The immediate reaction letter grade.
Yeah.
Right. It means nothing. It's completely meaningless. We're agreeing to that going into this, right?
But I think it's just a way to feel out the room. Are you coming from like a D? Are you coming from like an A? Just your general perspective. And let's stagger them so the audience can hear.
All right.
So Ramie, you say it first, and then on the beat after, I'll say my grade. And then so it should sound like bum.
Okay.
So the audience can hear all the grades. Okay?
Jonathan, you count to 3. On 3, I'll say my grade. All right.
All right. 1, 2, 3.
B minus.
A.
B.
Ooh.
A. You gave him an A.
And again, we'll find out in 3 years if these guys actually pan out.
Yeah.
But they addressed their single most important need with a guy ready to play right now in Garrett Bradbury.
So first round A.
Well, let me go through.
Okay.
Yeah, because I don't think you can sit here and in the 6th round they did this or didn't do this.
6th and 7th are all crapshoot.
Yes.
It is.
Right.
And so they needed this and they
Agreed.
they needed a safety and they didn't do this in the 6th round. No, you're literally just blindly throwing darts, right?
Right.
So they wind up with Garrett Bradbury, they wind up with a guy who on paper you can plug right in, highly touted. He's recognized as at worst one of the safest picks in the draft. At the top end, maybe he's your all-pro center for the next 10 years, right? I loved the Irv Smith draft pick. Took some cojones too, because you don't need a tight end necessarily, but to add another weapon that you can play alongside Kyle Rudolph.
I would disagree. You need that type of tight end. They didn't have that. Kyle's not that guy.
Yeah.
There's a misperception about Kyle. Kyle's a nice player and Kyle accumulates stats, but this dangerous pass catching tight end who basically can go out there and replace Treadwell, which is what's going to occur here. They needed this guy, especially for this quarterback.
Yeah. So fair point. I want to skip to Alex Madison for a second, because I think that was the most head-scratching pick. People were like, oh, wait a second. They already, some of these guys we see in training camp, the Rock Thomas, remind me of the other guy, Rock Thomas, and what's his name? The other backup that we've seen a couple times. And
was it Boone?
Boone, yes. And I think most people feel like, backup running back, if you do one of these 3 guys is going to be able to emerge and be fine. Let's take a little bit of a deeper look here. And this is part of the reason why I give them an A, because on the surface, you'd say running back. But then when you dig a little deeper and you look at why they drafted Alex Madison, according to Football Outsiders, the Vikings ranked 30th in the NFL last year in power run success, which is the percentage of runs on 3rd and 4th down with 2 yards or less to go. So 3rd and 2, 4th and 1, 4th and 2, that achieved a first down or a touchdown. They were one of the worst in the league when they lined up, and it was 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. You got to get 2 yards and a first down. And we all blame offensive line, and obviously that's a big part of it too. But Alex Madison is that exact running back, a guy that you hand the ball to, bowling ball-like physique and running style. And so as you fix the offensive line, you're doing 2 things. You're fixing your short run yardage game, and you're also accounting for the fact that Dalvin Cook is always hurt. We love Dalvin Cook. Yeah. When he's healthy, he's amazing. He's never healthy. So I like that they went a little bit deeper than just surface level, which they should. I mean, that's what they do. That's what their jobs are. And so when I first thought, I was like, a running back? What? And then I started doing some digging, and it was like, oh, this is a huge problem for the Vikings, and they're trying to solve it right now with the draft. So I actually give them an A. They didn't need defense. They didn't need defense nearly as much as they needed offense. And they're telling Mike Zimmer and the band that's been together for a few years, go do the same thing. And we're going to load up on this side of the ball because this is the thing that's the most deficient.
Did they have a choice, though? To me, this was the only choice. After you saw what you saw last year, there wasn't. If they had gotten cute, I would have absolutely said, you're crazy. If they had gone, you know what? We like the center, but this linebacker is pretty good. I would have said, you're nuts. After what you saw, you were basically, to me, given a roadmap of your problems. And it was incumbent, especially when Barr came back, it was incumbent upon you to take the draft and at least try to address them.
But did you have complete faith that they would? With Mike Zimmer sitting in the war room.
I thought to fail to do that would basically set people up to be fired. because there's no other place to go here.
But does Mike Zimmer get that?
I think when you hired Kubiak, it was made loud and clear. I think Kubiak came here for an enormous amount of cash for a coach and promises. Like, there's no way that they told Gary, turn Cousins around, but don't do it with additions. So at some point in time for taking this job, I think Kubiak had to be given resources. I think he had to be. And if he hadn't been, if I'm him, I'm not taking this job.
So you guys both said B, right?
I said B minus.
B minus and a
Yeah.
B. So, but we're all like, if B minus is the worst of all of us, we're all feeling pretty good about what they did this weekend. So what's the gap between where I'm at, which is bravo on paper? This is the most helpful thing you could have done for the guys on your team and your coaches, to where you guys stand.
Actually, it's funny because the reason I gave him a B minus is because of the pick of Alexander Madison in the third round with number 102 overall. And what I know about Alexander Madison, which I'll be honest, is mostly what I've read since he got picked by the Vikings. I didn't watch all that much Boise State football. I like what I hear about him. I like the highlight reels that you see of him. But of course, you're going to like highlight reels. They're highlight reels, right? That's what they're made for, to entertain me and for me to enjoy. But and Courtney talks about this in her breakdown. She was on Purple Daily today with Matthew Collar. You can hear that at scorenorth.com. They passed on needs there, including they could have went and got another offensive lineman instead of waiting until the fourth round to do that, because that was such a need. But you also had needs at cornerback. You had need at defensive line that all could have been addressed right there. There were guys on the board who were better value picks at that point than Alexander Madison was, because when you look at Madison, he was one of, in terms of the first 4 rounds, one of the biggest reaches in the draft. If you look at the consensus big board, he was 202, the number 202 ranked player in the draft, and they took him at 102. His draft board value was, let me see here. His draft board value was 262,
right?
And the value of the pick was 615.
But this speaks to Judd's point, which has been they drafted for this window right now.
But I think they could have got him later, or somebody in his class later.
Maybe, but what they said was, and I'm sitting here and I'm defending thing. I don't know what their logic was behind the scenes. I'm just speculating that they said doesn't matter. Okay, so maybe we're reaching for this, but 3rd and 2 is one of our biggest problems as a team. Let's fix it right now. If they thought this dude can fix our 3rd and 2 problem, let's not get cute or wait. Let's go down the path of, well, they needed a cornerback maybe for depth.
Mm-hmm.
And so that might have been, maybe that was the better value pick to pick a cornerback on that spot. Well, is a 3rd or a 4th round cornerback going to come in? He ain't, unless they trade Trey Wayne, he ain't starting over your 2 outside guys. We'll see what happens with Mike Hughes on the mend, but I don't think a 3rd or a 4th round cornerback is going to come in and play right away in the regular season, but Alex Madison is. Alex Madison might get touches. He might get 5 touches in week 1 in short yardage situations. So I think my guess is they said 3rd and 2 is a huge problem. Let's reach for a guy that has this particular skill set, even if there are better all around players.
I think you could have probably got him in the next round when you drafted Samia. But again, if they feel like he solves a problem and they didn't want to risk that, they didn't want to risk him going off the board before their next pick came around, I can understand that. But for where he was on the consensus board, and that theirs might not line up with that, and a lot of teams around the league might not line up with the consensus board that we're looking at on draft day.
Rick's like, hell, I got your consensus board right here.
It just seems like you reached for a guy who you might have been able to get around later while you still had needs, and there were players on the board who were worth the value of the pick that you were using there.
So let's go through this, because the question becomes, who got what they desired as far as the draft went? Who basically, from 1 to 3, to me, this can be broken down pretty simply. Kubiak was 1. Kubiak clearly made calls. I want that guy. I want that guy. I want that guy. Now, what I really like is on Thursday, they never got cute. And we've talked about, should they have traded back and perhaps, gone 3 back, 4 back? And I said, no, don't get cute. Identify the guy you want and take him. So to me, Kubiak is 1. Number 2, Spielman. Starting on Friday night, what did we get? Rick bailing back. More picks. And in fact, they got to the end of the 3rd round and took that kid at the end after trading, I think, twice or 3 times.
Yeah.
Number 3 on the, he got some of what he wanted and probably not a ton, is Zimmer. He got defensive players just later. How did he get them? Because Spielman, who loves to trade back and he loves to accumulate picks, had 12 picks. But the most important person in this equation is Kubiak. And he was basically handed 3 or 4 guys who I'm guessing from his film work and all that good stuff, Phil, said, I need these guys.
Yeah.
But I think everybody got something. It's just that Gary was 1, Rick was 2, because Rick loves to trade and people were going crazy. They're like, hey, when's he going to stop trading? Well, he doesn't stop.
Yeah.
And Zimmer was 3, but Mike a lot of times has been a top list.
Some of this too, it's so hard to sit here and say, because I'm looking at our Twitch comments, for instance, twitch.tv/ScoreNorth if you want to watch our radio faces here in studio. And Colin Montgomery 14, who must be at the turn right now on some Lynx course. Lynx at North Fork or something.
So many comments I could make.
He said Madison was a reach. And Ramie, you're looking at the consensus board and compared to where he was on the consensus board. But if we go back, let's let this play out, or let any draft from the past come up. Go back and look at the 2009 draft or something. I mean, there's so many picks that were very clearly reaches because those players are terrible and didn't pan out. But then there's a lot of other picks that, wow, I can't believe that guy slipped to the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round. So in the moment, yeah, if we look at consensus boards or Mel Kiper, it's easy to say, well, that was a reach for those of us who literally before last week didn't even know who Alex Madison was, right?
Yes.
If I would have said to you on Friday, hey, the Vikings are going to draft, like you don't know where Kiper's rankings are or what the consensus big board is. The Vikings are going to draft an offensive lineman in the 1st round. And then eventually, and they're going to grab a tight end that sort of complements and can take over for Kyle Rudolph in theory. And they're going to draft a running back that they think fixes their 3rd and 2 problem. We would have said, oh, cool, that sounds good. Yeah, we'll take that. But then when you start to line it up with, oh, what was the value of the pick? Where were they on the consensus big board? That's where it starts to get murky. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, what if Alex Madison is like the 14th best player in the draft? Then they didn't reach. But we won't know for 3 or 4 more years.
No, but we can only go off what we know right now in terms of where they were ranked and where they were picked. And that seems not only like a reach on a guy you probably could have gotten around later, but a reach on a guy you probably could have gotten around later in lieu of players who were on the board who were probably worth that pick at areas of need.
3/4 geek tweets into the show at Score North, at Phil Mackey.
Just go full geek.
Just go full geek.
Yeah, why would you go 75% geek?
What are you doing?
Yeah.
He says,
just do it.
From a grade standpoint, would you have effectively flipped the Madison and Samia picks and gotten a better grade? Let's say they drafted Samia.
I don't care. No.
In the 3rd round.
No, I could care less.
Okay.
I don't care.
And Samia was a good value for where they got him. So they almost do cancel each other out if you're going strictly by that.
The interesting thing about this entire exercise and discussion to me is this. If this was an okay team, not great, all right? I think you might say to yourself, well, these picks seem a little bit odd. I mean, you're not really drafting for the future necessarily, but think about the corner into which this team is painted and think about it this way. I think the first 2 days of this draft were entirely about one thing: next season.
Yeah.
So if this works and in 2021, the back washes out, guess what? You might not care. Now, if this was about 2021, you might say that seemed odd. And I don't like the pick if this is about getting future talent for years coming up. But this is a weird draft. This was a team, and they're not going to admit this ever, but this was a team that very much drafted for one thing: Kirk Cousins' 2nd year here.
Yeah.
That's it to me.
So that being said, they always say you can't draft grade a draft until 3 years later. Can we grade this Vikings draft in 1 year?
I think
is it fair to grade this Vikings draft in 1 year?
I think it's incredibly fair to grade this draft through the first 2 days after next season. Yes, I do.
But that's to say that, like, Garrett Bradbury is more than just a next year pick. He's both.
But he's incredibly important to next season. So yes, I think as far as the plethora of Saturday picks go, my answer to you is no idea. But I think it'd be very fair at the end of next season to look at this draft and say those first 2 rounds or 3 rounds, how did they do?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I do think you can grade it on a curve that leans toward, how do they do next year? I mean, you're paying a quarterback all this money, your coach is in his mid-60s, and you write Gary Kubiak in to try and fix the offense to take advantage of a window right now. So, like, to some extent, it's not your classic get as many picks as possible and hope it works out in 5 years. You'd like it to work out in 5 years, but leaning toward immediately, right?
Mm-hmm.